if there's something, you can sell it. You know, what the sort of, I think the protocol is online is you tell someone that they're broken and then you sell them the fix. Here's how you fix it. And what you were saying about glucose is, again, these things, the body's complex. And what social media tends to do, and it's not just social media, you know, just generally, we like things in like neat, simple, neat buckets. And healthcare isn't simple, it's messy and it's complicated. So we can fixate on one thing.
Welcome to the Wellness Report. My name is Susan Owens. Today we're going to be discussing influencer marketing within the wellness industry and the dangers that poses to the average consumer. Joining me today is Dr. Deborah Cohen, award-winning medically qualified broadcaster, journalist, and the author of Bad Influence: How the Internet Hijacked Our Health. So your book takes a look at influencer marketing and the impact that it's now having on the health industry and the wellness industry. Could you give us a bit of an overview about what your studies found?
Gosh, it's quite good. It works on lots of different levels. So what we've known for a long time is money shapes our health. So, for example, what the food industry does has an impact on our health. The drug industry decides what studies are going to be done or what drugs are going to be developed, and that has an impact on our health. The fossil fuel industry with climate change and whether they publish their information or not has an impact on our health. So money has always shaped our health in lots of different ways, sometimes for good, you know, development of vaccines, say, for example, or antibiotics, and sometimes for not so good. So research and information is concealed. Or, for example, what is considered well and unwell is shaped by commercial interests. And what I was interested in is to what extent that's happening online, because we've got this whole new industry that's come online, that are big tech companies that are clearly there to make money, and influencers, lots of different influencers that are making money in different ways. But also what happens on social media is they're gateways to private clinics, for supplements, for online pharmacies, for sort of really poorly regulated advertising, whether that's about the weight loss drugs or whether that's about a wearable device. So what I eventually thought was, well, this is what happens to our health when we put it on platforms that are essentially geared for shopping and entertainment. And you know, there's all different ways ways to make money on social media, whether that's going viral or whether that's advertising a particular supplement or something that or anything. And it might be one thing if you want to buy a handbag, say, for example, but it's something totally different when it might be something that affects your health.
Yeah, I do find when I'm on social media, if I like one video on a topic, say it's like a workout someone's done, if I kind of save that for later and go, oh, I might try that one, I do find the next 20 videos that I see are workout related or try this or try that. And it's like the algorithm can change so, like, it's almost so sensitive on platforms like Instagram that it must be that when it's a supplement or, you know, a weight loss drug, then you get it tenfold and then suddenly you're like wrapped up into this like bubble. So do you find that like kind of alters how health information is being shared with like the average everyday person that, you know, has no medical degree and has no idea what they should or shouldn't be taking?
Yeah, massively. And that's not to blame anybody. I mean, the whole reason I wrote this book were friends of mine were turning to social media for their health information. And it's an incredibly confusing space. Even me with my training, I go on there and I'm like, oh, sorting out fact from fiction. It's really hard. But in most studies that are done on any given topic, it's not the health professionals that tend to have the best trending videos. It tends to be experiences which have a role, and people want to share their experiences, but someone's experience doesn't tell the full story. And it's far harder to get something that is rigorous and evidence-based and statistical, which is the basis of healthcare. Healthcare is all about statistics, to trend. And then you end up in a bit of a bubble. So one anecdote that I tell in the book is about ADHD, where, and this was an experiment in Canada, where the top videos, I think they looked at the top 100 TikTok videos, and I don't think there was a single health professional in them. It was all people describing what they thought ADHD was. And most of them weren't evidence-based. They didn't reflect how you diagnose ADHD, the descriptions of symptoms. So a lot of them were like everyday things that might be something for everyone, like, you know, I bump into furniture, or I like fast food, or like that. And they were being associated with ADHD. And what they did quite cleverly is they did an experiment. So they split people into 3 groups. So they had 3 groups of people. So they had people with a formal diagnosis of ADHD, people who had self-diagnosed, and people without ADHD. And they showed them 10 of these trending videos. And people with ADHD, formal diagnosis didn't really change very much. Those who were self-diagnosed, it really confirmed to them that they had ADHD. But even those that didn't believe they had ADHD, by the end of the experiment, started questioning whether they did.
Oh, okay.
So that's how powerful it was. And it took a psychiatrist to come in to explain that actually what you have just seen are not ADHD symptoms. But it didn't change the mind that those who were self-diagnosed.
No.
But those who didn't think they did, that they sort of believe, well, like, okay, I know what's happened. But what that also shows is how difficult it is for the medical profession, and this isn't to defend bad doctors or bad clinicians, if someone really believes that they have the condition, and that is then confirmed and confirmed and confirmed over social media, even if they don't have it, it makes it a very difficult conversation for health professionals to have.
I've spoken to a few people, and they've said that more and more often you kind of see people coming into their GP practice and saying, hi, I have this thing, can I get the medication for it? Rather than saying, oh, well, here's all my symptoms and I'm not sure, you know, like actually looking for a diagnosis. Is they're kind of arriving, having already been diagnosed by the internet, and then, you know, then they're taking supplements. I mean, you see it a lot with like neurodivergent people are being pushed like different kind of focus supplements and all these kind of things. And it's like not the method you would go down, I'm sure, as a doctor. And essentially, like, people are self-medicating with supplements and with wearables and all this stuff. And you speak quite a lot about the wearables and how almost like dangerous that is, because it's almost like the door opening to you just being in charge of your health diagnosis.
And it's important. People are empowered. And
yes,
that's really important. People should be empowered and feel empowered, but it's got to be done in the right way. And part of what happens is a lot of these things are sold as take control of your health, be empowered, but actually they lack evidence, or actually could in some instances be harmful. That's not empowerment, that's exploitation. And it's difficult because science is difficult. Science, and I don't mean that in a really sort of patronizing kind of way, but science takes time to work out what works and what doesn't work. It's expensive to do these big studies to work out what works and doesn't work. But the issue with social media is it allows that in many ways to be bypassed. And I've written a lot about the drug industry in the past. I've been quite critical of some of their behaviours. But they're the most sort of regulated out of this whole health market.
yeah.
They still have to do massive trials before they get a drug onto the market. But that's not the same for a lot of the other stuff that's being sold.
Yeah, I feel like a big shock, I think, from my perspective, because I just never would have kind of expected it to be a thing, was that the version of wearables, the glucose monitor on the back of the arm, and, you know, how people are constantly monitoring their own glucose, which has obviously mostly been associated with people who are diabetic. And I just feel like, from your research about wearables, like, have we just kind of tricked ourselves, or kind of like stumbled and tripped into kind of like a health anxiety world where we're just constantly monitoring? Like, I wear an Apple Watch and I see so many things on my data, like about how well I may have slept when I feel awful, or, you know, how, you know, your heart rate's higher or lower depending on everything. And I feel like I know too much about myself but also I don't know how much of it I can actually trust or take into consideration. So like, how have the wearables kind of impacted us like normal people who, you know, haven't got a medical degree?
It is. I mean, I wear nothing.
Yeah.
Literally, I went out with
Says
loads
it
of my
all.
friends to a spa, and I was literally the only one that wasn't taking a supplement or didn't have a wearable. That isn't to say I'm
Right.
doing the right thing, by the way. It was just
Yeah.
I'm sort of skeptical about this kind of thing. And I sort of think, if I feel well, you know, you go for your stuff, like you go for your smear test, or you go for,
Mm.
you know, I'm not at the age yet where you need a mammogram or whatever. So you go for the stuff, the checks that are recommended by the NHS. Um, and other than that, I think there's a lot of, I know when I've had a bad night's sleep because I feel rubbish.
Yeah.
And that's how you diagnose. And that's what's interesting with bad sleep. That's sort of it's how you feel. Like people need different amounts of sleep. And as you get older, you probably need less because you're not as, or you might be a bit more tired, but your sleep does change with age.
Mm.
But it if you feel okay, you feel okay. And there was so many people that I spoke to. It was like, oh, I had a good night's sleep, but my watch or my ring was saying that I didn't. And you know, there's this idea of you need 8 hours sleep. There's quite a lot of marketing behind that to sell you stuff to help you sleep better. Sleep's a really big market. Um, which is, you know, I think it's quite interesting. If there's something you can sell it, you know, what the sort of, I think the protocol is online is you tell someone that they're broken and then you sell them the fix. Here's how you fix it. And what you were saying about glucose is, again, these things, the body's complex. And what social media tends to do, and it's not just social media, you know, just generally, we like things in like neat, simple, neat buckets. And healthcare isn't simple, it's messy and it's complicated. So we can fixate on one thing. So for example, let's say you take glucose. And there's a really good reason people with type 1 and type 2 diabetes who use insulin use glucose monitors, because adjusting it is really important to their health. We know it both in the short term and the long term. And that's based on that's based on robust research. It's not the same for well people that don't have diabetes. And our bodies regulate. Our bodies, when our blood sugar goes high, and it does go high because guess what? We've eaten stuff with glucose in, it might peak and then it comes back down again. And it's when those peaks are really, 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 really long, then you start maybe asking questions. But we don't know really. We're still in the foothills of really understanding what this looks like in healthy people. But what was happening was that people were seeing those peaks and going, oh my God, you know, I've got to get rid of those peaks. They're harmful toxic spikes. No, they're not. Just, you know, that's what happens. Your body releases insulin when you see, you know, so it gets pushed into cells, the glucose gets pushed into the cells. And when your blood sugar's too low, it releases another hormone called glucagon to regulate. And that it's called homeostasis. It's how your body regulates itself. But what happens, and again, this is sort of generalizing a little bit, is that when people are monitoring something, they tend to fixate on that one thing. So again, anecdotally, and this is in the absence of really, you know, massive studies, is people were sort of coming in and saying, well, I had a glucose spike, so I ate burgers instead. And anecdotally, one, because it didn't spike your glucose. So if you fixate on your glucose, you're going to miss all the other stuff around it. It's like monitoring one tree and missing the forest. And that's the problem if you fixate on one thing. And it can be good. I mean, obviously we use wearables all the time in medicine. But that's because we know, or we monitor things. So for example, blood pressure, we monitor it because we know if it's too high, it can be harmful. And it increases your risk of heart attacks and strokes. But we don't have that similar thing with glucose yet in healthy people. And the other thing you need to do before you measure something is not just what am I measuring or how am I measuring it? It's what meaningful difference does changing this value make, both in the short term and the long term?
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And it's like kind of, I guess this idea of kind of knowing too much about ourselves or having too much access to stuff. Do you think that because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns and the kind of access we had to like lateral flow tests and at-home testing, that people kind of have, I guess, become a little bit desensitized to the idea of doing their own kind of medical testing and stuff, that now people are investing in at-home tests for, you know, hormone panels or genetic testing, or like something as simple as like spitting into a cup and sending it off and finding out all of your family history has kind of led us to this point now where, you know, we, I guess, just maybe have an overconfidence, but also like an anxiety around it, that we need to know so much information in order to be well or achieve longevity.
And we've been sold that. We've been
Yeah.
sold. And I mean, the thing is, and you hear this on podcasts, obviously we're speaking on a podcast. But there's only so many podcasts, you know, don't drink too much, don't smoke, eat healthily, exercise, and don't be lonely. Massive one there. There's only so many times you can say that, you know, and obviously there are different ways of achieving that. I mean, that's where we know that the big sort of robust evidence is, and for good health, you know, eating an apple,
Yeah.
for example, or something like that. But we are constantly told, and the pandemic did play a part. And I think there's a few reasons for that. First of all, as you said, you know, we were lateral flow testing left, right, and centre, and we were told to constantly test. But also, what it allowed is, I think there was a few things that happened. First of all, our trust in authority dropped. So people stopped being as trusting of authority. There was a big growth in testing, and people got used to self-testing. But also there was a big switch from seeing your GP to telehealth to being online. So people just got used to seeing a doctor online. And I think for certain generations as well that are used to doing everything in the palm of your hand, well, it makes sense just to see someone online. And that's meant private clinics can set up very easily and virtually. So you don't have to have, if you're a private clinic or a pharmacy, you don't have to have a building, which are expensive. A website is a very quick and easy way for a gateway to services.
I suppose like when you kind of go back to like the influencers and the longevity bros and all these kind of like key names and stuff that are coming out, you know, and you have like someone on the high end of the scale like Brian Johnson or Gwyneth Paltrow that have companies around this, or just a lot lower down the scale where it's, you know, micro influencers who are maybe pushing like wellness gummies and all these kind of things. Like, I guess when you talk about drug trials and what needs to go on to legally make these drugs accessible, what is kind of the gray area that influencers are kind of existing in now with the way that they can advertise wellness optimization gummies, all these kind of things to us?
One thing you can't do is make a health claim.
Okay.
So that's why you see very vague claims. So you might say, and it's the same with some of the tests you on that you can consume direct to consumer tests. So you can't say this is a test for bowel cancer. You might say this is a bowel health, because it's vague and kind of meaningless. Health is precise. You can't say this gummy will help you help treat type 2 diabetes. And that's why aging is offered, it's anti-aging, because aging isn't an illness. So what the regulators, so if you're in America, it's the FDA, if you're in the UK, it's the MHRA, the Medicines Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, they're interested in health and health claims and medicine. So they're interested in many ways in sick people. What we're not interested in so much is well people. So if we go back to the continuous glucose monitors, there's a big role for them with people with a health condition, diabetes. But what isn't regulated is the wellness market. So but it's a much bigger market. So if you're a company that makes them, there's far fewer people with diabetes than there are well people that can be convinced that they need to stay well. And one way of doing that is monitoring your glucose. So again, if you think about this with supplements, you can't make a health claim because then you'd have to have the trial evidence. But what you can do is make these really vague claims about being anti-aging or good for your hair or
Yeah.
things like that, or the boost mood.
Yes. Yeah.
And so they're very vague. Um, and and then the other thing that they do is they sort of talk personal anecdote. And it's very hard to regulate personal anecdote, someone's personal story. Oh, this made me feel better. This gave me this. This made me feel like this. Because no regulator can say, well, no, it didn't make you feel like that.
Yeah. Like
So
the lived experience.
personal stories and lived experience, yeah, we have freedom of speech. Yeah, and you can't say that, and that's why you have to be careful, and that's why they use a lot of personal storytelling. So for example, Zoe, that's they use that very heavily. Before they did any studies, they were talking about everyone, they had their members and people were talking about their personal experience. This gave me energy, this helped me lose weight, this boosted my mood.
So I just want to pick up on something you said there about aging. I suppose like when you have this idea of like longevity and health optimization, it kind of seems like it's more important to like live forever than live this well and enjoying a full life. Not to say these people don't have a full life, but do you find the normal anti-aging process is almost being treated now as if that's some sort of like chronic illness almost, that just living the like normal average life is almost not good enough anymore?
Yeah, well, there were attempts to make aging a disease.
Right.
So, and there are illnesses that become more common with aging. Inevitably, cancer becomes more common, heart disease, a whole raft of illnesses become more common as you age. But there were moves to try and make aging a disease, and that's for various sort of regulatory reasons. But yeah, I mean, it's not just, I guess they talk about health span and lifespan. So lifespan, at the moment, there's a big gap in the UK, and it depends on your social background and economic background as well. You poorer you are, you don't tend to live as long, and you live longer in poorer health than if you are wealthy. And that is across the UK. It's across the world. It's across the UK, certainly. And the constant monitoring, and how am I feeling? Am I going to check in? And I'm not sure how healthy that is.
No.
And or constantly looking at this spike, or how did I sleep, or this. If we had really good evidence that was going to make a huge difference, then maybe that would be a good thing, but we don't have that. And how much is that impacting on your quality of life? And it's funny, one cardiologist said to me, oh, you could build a whole intensive care unit at home if you wanted to, with all the wearables that you've got available. And another doctor said to me about all the sort of measuring all the wearables and all the scans and everything else that are being full body scans that are being marketed towards healthy people. It's just like, I'd rather go whitewater rafting.
Yeah.
But that's obviously skepticism. But again, there's a lot of, you'll find issues that aren't issues. They're called incidentalomas on some of these things, and it can trigger anxiety, or what does this mean? I don't know. Or you monitor something and then, oh look, there's the supplement to help fix it, but we don't have the evidence. And that isn't to say there mightn't be good evidence further down the line that all this stuff matters, but everything in healthcare is a balance between benefit and harm. So the first thing you want to think about is, how much is this going to benefit me genuinely? Where am I getting the benefit from this?
Okay.
What do we know? What does the science say? Robust science. We're not talking someone sort of rubbishy little self-done study.
Yeah.
What's the robust evidence? And is it going to benefit me? And then what are the potential harms? So if it's causing me anxiety, that's a harm. If it's causing me stress, and we go back to sleep. So one of the things with sleep is, one of the first things they do is if you have sleep problems, part of it is your belief about sleep. So if you go to bed thinking, I'm a really bad sleeper, I'm a really bad sleeper, I'm a really bad sleeper, what does that do to your sleep quality?
Well, that's true. I feel like if I wake up in the middle of the night, I suddenly go, oh, that's my sleep ruined, and then it just means I wake up more in the night, or then I can't fall back asleep, and it's like almost like passing off a fully well and healthy body in. But the thing that goes at jeopardy then is your mental health, and then that has a knock-on effect, and then that has, you could end up in this spiral forever and take like your cocktail of supplements and wear every latest bit of tech and stuff, and it just doesn't ever really feel like you're gonna hit exactly the right peak you want, because one day, obviously tragically, but you could have an accident, and then that would have nothing to do with how healthy you were or anything about if you bounce back. But I suppose just to close out, it's just more kind of like, how can people have this healthy relationship with their own health going forward? Like, what is the best way to kind of handle this? Is it just as simple as going to GP and getting regular checkups, or is it just taking care of your brain more than anything else, your mental health? I'm not sure.
I know it's very flippant for me to say, and I think it's the obvious stuff. It's exercise, get outside, eat healthily, don't eat too much sugar, don't drink too much, but moderation, don't smoke. And the big one I think we don't talk about enough is don't be lonely. And that has a massive, and there's really good evidence that actually being lonely has a big impact on your health. So when I look at, so in the book I look at some of these sort of longevity communities, or, and actually, or the biohacking communities, and I sort of posit, and I don't know, but I suspect some of the health benefit that they're getting is actually from the community, as opposed to measuring all the supplements. But that interaction and that relationship, it gives them something to talk about and bond over. And I suspect, and again, it's a hypothesis because I don't have the evidence, but that's possibly where there's some benefit. Where we know there's good evidence of benefit is community.
Because they do talk about how hard, difficult, and like it can be to make new friends as an adult when you move to a new city, or when you move for a job or something. It's really difficult to kind of restart your life almost. And then they always say like, oh, maybe the best thing to do is to join clubs, like run clubs, all these kind of things. It gets you out there, gets you enjoying life and meeting and talking to new people. And I do think that there is, and obviously I'm not an expert, but there's some sort of correlation between, you do see a lot of like young men that get involved in this like health optimization and longevity. And I do feel that that's because like there isn't really an avenue for them always to open up and, have a sense of community when they are told they have to be, like tough, strong, all these things that we've heard about in the past. And I think that, I guess, you don't want to say companies kind of can hop on that and, prey on that, but it's just, I suppose, more about, rather than thinking too much about yourself, because you'll only get more locked in, I suppose. You need to kind of branch out, and getting involved in a run club is probably the best way to do something like that. It's like kind of ticks all your boxes, right?
Oh, dancing's great. Clubbing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Muscular exercise. You're mingling with people, music, go rave,
Definitely.
day raving. I don't know, I'm being slightly flippant, but not everyone experiences loneliness in the same way. I'm a massive extrovert. I like people. I like to be around people, etc., etc. But there's other people that don't need that so much. But it, yeah, and the problem is when it becomes toxic, as you sort of alluded to, is when that sort of space, that looks maxing and everything else, and that sort of culture becomes toxic and becomes about toxic behaviors, as opposed to sort of community type behaviors. But there's clearly a massive market. I mean, I constantly see longevity conferences and stuff like that. Funnily enough, I'm never asked to speak at them. Really hard to be skeptical, but no, but there is a role. There's a serious role to kind of understand how we and why we age and what we can do about it, and are there measures. And it is serious science in there, but
Yeah.
but serious science takes a long time, particularly things like that, is to work out whether something makes you live longer. You've got to work out whether they actually live longer, and that can take a long time to study. So in that space, yeah, in that space, you'll have a lot of dodgy science that steps in as well.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for your time tonight. That was really interesting. And I imagine your book is available at all bookstores for everyone to find.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And that's all from us here at The Wellness Report. Make sure to subscribe down below for more interviews just like this one.